All right, well now that little Corvette problem is out of the way, I got the 55 back in the shop here, and there's a few things that I need to address. The biggest thing that I noticed when I was letting it run and the cooling system was pressurizing was that stainless steel water neck that I made off of the water pump and brazed on. There's a lot of areas where the brazing didn't fully attach to the casting and water's seeping through. You can kind of see it because there's like rust spots. I'll show you that in a second. Another issue that I'd like to address is turning radius. It's not terrible for such a big car, but I know that if I flatten out the inner lips on these fenders, I'll get at least close to another inch of turning radius on both sides. So I'll be popping the fenders off and hammering those flat. And I'd also like to mount the front bumper. I got the weld-on bungs that I need to put on the front frame horns to make that work, so I'll be getting that done as well. And then I think I have to figure out a seat. Once there's a seat in this thing, I'll be pretty comfortable driving it down the street because it actually stops okay, and it feels like it'll go pretty good. So gotta get a seat figured out. And then the last thing is the power steering. All right, so for the fenders, what I did was I just cranked the wheel each way and took a Sharpie and just marked the areas where I'm rubbing, and we're going to hammer those flat. And even if we don't gain a lot of clearance, we'll at least gain not being able to catch the lip with the tire and rip it out, which would suck. So at least we'll save ourselves from that worst case. All right, and the water neck, check it out. Probably kind of hard to see, but I know you can probably see the rust formation there. There's just certain areas where the water just seeps out. I guess I didn't heat up the casting enough, so we'll have to go back over that with a torch again. We'll have to remove that whole piece and attempt to fix it. So yeah. Okay, so the basic idea for mounting the bumper is I bought these little bungs off of eBay, and they fit into 1-inch ID or 1-inch OD tubing that is 1/8 inch wall. So what I've done is I just pre-mock them up on the bumper. I'm gonna mock the bumper up on the frame horns where it needs to sit, measure how much tubing I have to add to each one, and cut some tubing and weld them on, and we should be good to go. So the problem I'm running into right now, this bumper was on a car that was wrecked, and it's tweaked in just a certain way that it's interfering with the splash guard there. Let's see, my little mounts are actually butted up on the frame on each side, so it worked out pretty perfectly, but it looks like we're gonna have to take the bumper off and probably throw this in a vise or try to figure out some way to bend it out, because I'm pretty sure, let's take a look at the other side here. Yeah, you can see this lip comes around and it stays pretty flat, right? And you can also see the way this curves. And then when you look at the other side here, you can see the lip is curving down and inwards, and it looks like this whole piece was just pushed in probably. That's what caused it to peak here and tear. And so we need to try and twist it here out. Looks pretty good. Right, yeah. This side is not damaged. Let me go around to this side. And it's hanging out a little bit. Yeah, I wouldn't want to drive around like that. So it looks like it still needs to come out more here and go in more there. I think. We'll get it back on that thing and start pulling on it some more. Alright, well, it just so happens those bungs that I bought were just the right length, so I didn't even have to trim any tube pieces to stick on there. I wasn't able to get the bumper perfectly straight, but it's close enough, I'm gonna say, for now. It is sticking out a little bit, but there's really nothing more I can do for it at this time. I think it's got some more serious issues, like in this area. Or it's just, I'm not sure, pretty tweaked. Anyways, this is the other side. Fits pretty well. Ain't exactly sure if I got it angled up or down. I'm probably guessing it's angled up a little bit, especially considering the rake the car has, but. All right, I got the passenger side fender off of the car, and I'm gonna go ahead and flatten these lips out. You can see how much they overhang into the fender well. And I think we'll get a good bit of turning radius by flattening them, so let's get started. All right, now you can see the difference there. I think we're gonna gain a pretty good amount of clearance, and you shouldn't have a problem with the tire pulling the fender out either, so happy with that. Alright, little update. I went ahead and adjusted the mount points on the bumper because I didn't like it angled the way it was, so I'm much happier with the way it's fitting now. And I also managed to run to the hydraulic store, as you probably saw, and I got a slightly longer line made up. So this is the old one, and this is the new one. It's quite a bit longer than I needed, but it will do the job. And now I'm just making up my low pressure lines. So I've got some rubber hose, and I'm going to be running a little power steering cooler, as well as a filter that'll mount down on the frame down this way, right above the power steering rack and sway bar. And then I'm gonna go ahead and finish making these lines up. I should be able to add fluid to the system once I get a filter. So let's get started. Okay, so for the power steering / hydro boost setup here, I've got my high pressure line feeding directly to the high pressure port on the hydro boost, and then from the exit on the hydro boost, it runs down to the steering rack and feeds the high pressure port there, and then from the exit of the steering rack, it's a low pressure line to a cooler, which then goes into a filter housing, which will bolt to the frame right here. And then it goes to the reservoir again. And that's about it. So I just gotta get a filter, and I'm ready to add fluid to the power steering system. All right, I got all the fittings tightened up on our hydro boost, our steering rack, and our steering pump. So we're gonna move on to draining the cooling system so that we can take off our water neck fitting here and try and braze this a little bit better, see if we can't get a good seal. I hope we don't have to do that a few times. So what we're gonna do is disconnect this AN fitting right here for the heater hose, which is currently running a loop to the top of the head. And what we're gonna do with that is finish our heater connections. I went ahead and put a couple of bung fittings, or I guess bulkhead fittings is what they're called, going through the firewall here, as you can see. There's one there and one higher. And I've got some other fittings and a valve that I'm gonna use to basically use this as a heater core, and probably have it mount somewhere up here. Not 100% sure yet, but I'm going to use this little spall fan on it to blow air through it, and that's the plan. So let's find a bucket so that we can start draining this thing and get that water neck off. Okay, new plan. I don't want to jack it up, so I'm just going to start it up and back it out, and then unhook that line, let everything drain, pull it back in. I'm pretty sure that some of the settings on that P pump are gonna need some adjustment because this thing smokes and it's not supposed to. Anyways, let's get this line disconnected so that we can drain the coolant. All right, so to get to that plate, we have to take off the alternator, which isn't too big of a deal. Just one bolt. Alright, now that I've got it off, you can see I'm pretty sure there wasn't any pinholes, even though that looks like one, but it was more just like areas where the surfaces didn't melt together, more on the casting side. So there's like a crack here, there was one like in this vicinity, and it looks like there's a pretty good one at the bottom here too, I think. So I'm not real sure what I'm gonna do. I want to just hit it with the torch again and see if I can't get it to melt some more, but at the same time I'm a little bit concerned about the oxidation in there and if that's going to cause porosity issues just like with welding. So I'm going to do a little Googling real quick and I'll be back. Alright, so I might have some problems just trying to get these areas to blend together, but we're going to try it anyways. The only other option really is to cut it off and start over, so rather make a last-ditch effort before we do that. So let's give it a shot. Alright, it's a little bit messy, kind of looks about the same as it did last time. I'm questioning whether or not I should go through with the die grinder and grind the excess off again. I think that was possibly what led to the cracks exposing themselves last time. So I'm going to think about that for a minute while it cools down, and then I'll get back to you. Okay, well, I decided to clean it up a little bit with the die grinder, and it's cooled down enough to put the hoses back on it. So I don't have a really good way to leak test this, but what I'm gonna do is just kind of run the hose around in the backside there, and we'll see if we get any rust marks coming out around the seam. And I know that's not as good as pressure testing it, but I don't really have an option for that besides putting it on the car. So let's just run some water through it and see what happens. Alright, well, my leak test did work. I just ran water through it and positioned it in a way whereas the outlet here was uphill, so it kind of pooled up inside the chamber there, and I did get a little bit of leakage in this area right here. So I went ahead and heated it back up and applied some more braze rod, and I'm not going to grind it this time because it looked like for sure it was coming out right at the seam where the brazing rod meets the casting material. So We'll leave it like this, let it cool down for a few minutes, test it again to see what happens. Square one, had another leak, so I heated it up again, and then the silicone bronze started to not like the heat, and it started to crack around the original crack, and here we are. So I'm gonna clean it up after it cools down and figure something else out. Yeah, I got it all cleaned up, got almost all the silicone bronze off there. And what I'm going to try this time is preheating it real good and then MIG welding it, because I've seen that work on a lot of cast iron manifolds. At least I think they're cast iron, so let's see what happens. Alright, well, I finally got it all put together again. After I MIG welded it on the first time, the stainless 90 that attached here started cracking all crazy. I could show you some of the stress fractures on the inside that you could see there. And the reason why that happened, I believe, is from heating this piece too much with the torch to get the braze to melt. So this is what it looks like now. The bead, it had trouble in a few areas laying down on the cast, but in other areas, as long as I kept it moving at a pretty good pace, it was okay. So like I said, I leak tested it and no water came out, so we're gonna put it back on the car and see if it'll hold pressure. Everything all connected back up and tightened up, and we're gonna see if our sticks holds water. Pressurized water. Well, unfortunately, it is still leaking from a couple of pinholes, so it's kind of hard to see, but I've seen some water coming out here, and I'm pretty sure some's coming out towards the bottom here as well, if it's not just runoff. But yeah, just saw a whole drip fall. So back to the drawing board again. So I finally got myself a filter for our power steering fluid. And we're gonna go ahead and take off the water outlet again and see if we can't figure out where those leaks are and if we can't get them to hold water. So we'll worry about this later. Right now we're just gonna go ahead and break it down again for the third time. Alright, so I've decided what I'm going to do is go ahead and try and weld the inside of the joint. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to get the MIG torch in there pretty well, and should be able to just do like little spot welds all the way around, not get too much heat into it, see what that does. Right now I'm just preheating the entire cast part. I'm going to get it pretty warm here, probably to where I'll have to wear a glove to move it around before I start applying the MIG weld. up the best I could on the inside. There were a couple of spots that were kind of hard to get to, so we'll see what happens. Keep your fingers crossed. This is the third time we'll be installing it, so third time's a charm, right? All right, it's about that time again. We're gonna see this time if we're still leaking. Like I said, it's the third try, so keep your fingers crossed. There we go. And now we wait. Well, it's still leaking. I think it's only leaking from one spot now, one area at least. So I am gonna have to pull it back off again and fix it, or try to make it stop leaking. So I'm gonna go make some dinner, and hopefully I'll have enough time to get back on that tonight. But I don't know. If anything, I'll update you in the next video. Not to mention, I did hook up the filter on the power steering setup and added fluid. The Hydro Boost feels like it's working great, and so does the steering. So I can't wait to get this thing out on the road and see what it feels like.